makes me happy to introduce to you Mr. Vincent Price.
Vincent Price is one of my all-time favorite pop culture icons. No matter what kind of project he did, he was always having fun.
Nicked myself shaving.
You must be more careful.
Not only was he in on the joke, he wanted everyone else to be in on it too. If you ask me, Vincent Price was the perfect candidate to host a horror anthology show. And guess what? He tried, but it didn't work out. We're going to look at Half Hour to Kill, the unsold Vincent Price pilot that never aired.
Good evening.
On this edition of Anthology of Anthology TV Shows. Welcome to the latest installment of our new series covering weird and forgotten anthology shows. Subscribe to Atomic Abe so you'll never miss a video. We've got some big ones coming up. In the meantime, enjoy our latest offering. There are two kinds of anthology shows, the ones without a host and the ones with a host. Of all the different flavors of anthology TV shows, horror seems to make the most of a good host. Over the years, we've seen everything from Freddy Krueger hosting his own series,
You tell Freddy when it doesn't hurt.
to David Bowie presenting episodes of The Hunger.
I paid the price for immortality in more ways than one.
And look, there's an episode of Night Visions hosted by Henry Rollins.
Something has appeared. Something beyond logic.
I think a perfect personality to host a horror anthology show would have been Vincent Price. Now, I'm not talking about mystery. No offense, PBS. But this video is concentrating on a television footnote going back to the 1950s. Before we can get into that, we need to understand how TV was different back then. These days, TV and movies are like a two-way street. It's not uncommon for a movie star to appear on a TV show. Back in the 1950s, attitudes were less evolved. Film was an art form, while television was furniture. For movie stars, working in TV was a real step down. But there was a formula that seemed to grant the movie star some status. An anthology show with their name in the title. Networks aired these kinds of Story of the Week programs with big-name talent, like Joseph Cotten, June Allison, and Dick Powell. Trust me, even if you don't know those names, they were a big deal in 1955. As a matter of fact, one of the biggest box office draws of the 20th century had her own series.
And a dream is a fairy tale.
Former child star Shirley Temple was all grown up and hosting a family-friendly show called Storybook. It was the Shelley Duvall fairy tale theater of its day. A lot of times the actor would not only host the show, but they'd also play a character in that week's story. This very specific boilerplate was used when Vincent Price was hired for a project in 1958. At the time, movies like Laura and the Ten Commandments had made a name for Vincent Price. Plus, he was finding his niche as a horror icon, having starred in House of Wax, The Invisible Man Returns, and The Fly.
You must see it with your own eyes to believe it.
Seems like a no-brainer to give this guy his own creepy TV show, right? So Desilu Productions, the company owned by Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, financed a pilot cleverly titled Half Hour to Kill. To add some supernatural flair, Price would mysteriously appear like a ghost.
There's something stealthy about fog.
And Price seemed to enjoy delivering host banter.
Caviar is a luxury item, and so is murder.
And like those other star-driven Story of the Week shows, Price would do more than just host.
Every week at this time, I shall have the pleasure of being your host. And frequently, when the story permits, I shall have the privilege of playing a leading role.
There's only one filmed episode of Half Hour to Kill, a story titled Freedom to Get Lost. The pilot was directed by Paul Stewart, a character actor best known for playing the butler in Citizen Kane. The script was written by Halstead Wells, no relation to Orson or H.G. Wells. Halstead would go on to write episodes of Alfred Hitchcock Presents and Night Gallery, As a matter of fact, he wrote an episode of Night Gallery that starred Vincent Price.
What a glorious bloody color.
As promised, this episode features Vincent Price in the lead role.
I shall become a man named Gene Walcott, a man in a fog of his own.
We know Price is playing a character because he doesn't have his iconic mustache. Gene is a lonely fellow, making his way in the Big Apple. There's lots of narration to remind us how lonely he is.
His loneliness began to boil up and choke him from inside. Everybody had a girl except him. The loneliness was turning into a crazy, shrill pressure building in his head.
So Gene does what any romantic 6'4" bachelor would do. He harasses a woman on the subway turnstile.
I'm harmless. I'm from New Mexico. I'm a harmless scientist from New Mexico.
Would you please let me out?
Not your traditional meet cute, but somehow it worked.
You may be a scientist, but you're also a fool.
The dream girl agrees to go back to his pad. We discover they'd stayed up all night talking. And for the rest of their date, Gene shows red flag after red flag.
Are you married?
Yes and no. I can't tell you my name. I'm not allowed to. Well, I'm not a clam. I knew a Joyce once. She died. I'll tell you about Joyce and how she died and how nobody else in the world knows.
That is a lot to take in for anyone, let alone a woman named Joyce. Later, Gene tries to impress his date with his professional achievements.
I figured out a way to blow the moon right out of the sky.
America can, should, must, and will blow up the moon.
Finally, he says the words that every woman wants to hear.
You can stay upstairs. You can have the whole floor to yourself. There are heavy locks on the doors, and there's a phone up there. If you hear me battering it in, you can call for help.
Ladies just love it when a man provides a phone to call for help. You might be wondering, why is Joyce putting up with this? Just like in a rom-com, she's got a perfectly good reason. We discover that Joyce is an undercover agent.
This is Pat. It's in the village, 3 Grove Court, ground floor. I'm going to need help.
She tracked Gene because he is suspected of murdering his mistress. You know, the other Joyce, the one who died.
Listen, was there a psychiatrist in New Mexico by the name of Joyce? Well, he killed her. He fixed her car so it would run over a cliff.
That is some real typecasting. Vincent Price is like the Michael Jordan of killing his wife.
I hate you.
And when Gene discovers that the woman he brought home is an undercover agent, he treats her like they're already married.
Joyce.
The episode ends with Gene getting arrested. He confesses to killing the agent and admits that he's responsible for the death of his lover in New Mexico. But he never tampered with her car.
But it was really more brutal than that. I put the tears in her eyes so she couldn't see.
Unfortunately, Half Hour to Kill did not get picked up. It's a shame because we know Vincent Price would have had fun playing different characters, and the name of the show suggests he would have been playing a variety of killers, lunatics, and homicidal gentlemen. 2 years later, another horror icon would host a macabre anthology series. Thriller was hosted by Frankenstein actor Boris Karloff, who frequently appeared in the story of the week.
Have no fear.
Fun fact, on Thriller, Boris Karloff's catchphrase was telling viewers,
"As sure as my name is Boris Karloff."
Except his name isn't Boris Karloff, it's William Henry Pratt. Maybe that's why the show only lasted 2 seasons. No credibility. It's a shame we never got more episodes of Half Hour to Kill. Vincent Price would have made a good host. Come to think of it, he would have been a good host on Rod Serling's Night Gallery.
Buy this greatest name in art at Sears prices.
The good news is that by not having a TV show, Vincent Price was free to make some of his most iconic movies, like The Tingler and House on Haunted Hill. Plus the occasional TV cameo where he had the freedom to get campy.
I really sort of look back on my career with great joy because the television appearances.
Well, you've done
I've done hundreds of television shows, and some of the ones were really kind of masterpieces in their miniature way, which were great fun to do. I love doing that.
Are you then what might be described as a legitimate actor?
Captain, you've caught me at a bad time. I'm up to my aspidistra in guacamole.
Still can't figure out how we get your private phone number.
Unless he looked at it, Lieutenant, just as you did. You know, I'm living proof that there is such a thing as reincarnation. I died on this show last year, and here I am doing it again.
That's all for this edition of Anthology TV shows. Be sure to subscribe to Atomic Abe. Hit that notification bell so you'll never miss a video. And why not check out some of our previous installments, like our look at 3 different anthology shows hosted by Orson Welles.
This is Orson Welles. I do hope you'll join me again next time at the scene of the crime.